Okay, Kaporet, right. You can see, right, you can see the Kaf, Pei, and Reish, okay, that has the very literal sense of covering, okay. Atoning is covering in Hebrew. The Yom HaKippurim, okay, is related to Kaporet, something that covers. In the very literal sense, when God is telling Noah to build an ark, he is telling him you should cover it מבית ומחוץ בכופר. וחפרת אותה מבית ומחוץ בכופר. You should cover it inside and outside with a covering. Okay, tar and pitch, whatever. But the root that is used for literal covering is kaporet or kaf pen reish. We don't use it so much in modern Hebrew. It is kind of set apart for talking about atonement, okay, and not regular covering. So the weekly portion of Acharei Mot, as I said today, we have two weekly portions, and we'll focus on holiness in the weekly portion of Kedoshim. But this is Acharei Mot, and we have Vaidaber Adonai El Moshe, right? Very, very common structure. And then we are given the time, the description of the time and the context. Okay? אחרי מות שני בני אהרון, בקרבתם לפני אדוני וימותו. Now, בקרבתם presents here a very interesting combination. This is either a temporal clause or a clause that expresses the reason, because the bet can be translated, the bet preposition can be present or can provide the information of time, and you can see the translation here chose when, which is a good translation. I'm not saying it's not. Bekorvatam lifnei Adonai vayamutu. It can be this temporal clause, but it also provides the context and the reason for what happened. Okay, so the whatever comes after is the sequence of actions that have to be done when approaching the presence of the Lord. We've talked about that in the past. We've talked about the death of the sons of Aaron, and we've talked about Peretz Uzzah. Okay, and you can see the bet preposition functioning in the same context as to suggest the same time. Al Yavo bechol et. Okay, you cannot come whenever you want. Okay, lest you die. So bekorvatam lifnei Adonai vayamutu. Al Yavo bechol et velo yamut. Okay, so you can see how the instructions that are provided in verse 2 correspond with the title, so to speak, of verse 1. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the jussive mode, the mode that expresses the volitive mode, the mode that expresses the will of the speaker. We have here imperative, daber el Aharon achicha, and we have the jussive Yavo, which looks very similar to the yiktol Yavo here, just with a deficient spelling. Okay, and so we have the imperative daber, of which binyan?
Yeah.
Piel, right. How do you recognize this as a piel?
Negation the bet.
Right, the negation, the second root letter, in this case the bet, and we also have the vowel under the first root letter. These are like the two tells of these. I want to say that even the vowel following the first root letter is even more durable than the dagesh, because the dagesh may disappear if we're dealing with guttural letters and so forth. The vowel following the first root letter with a doubled stem in general, piel, pual, and hikpel, is not negotiable. Is not negotiable. It's always there. Daber el Aaron achicha. So here we have this imperative, and now following it we have al Yavo. Okay, al Yavo is the negation. Okay, is a prohibitive of the imperative. Okay, the negative command, if you will. And the negative command in Hebrew is expressed by the this word al followed by the jasiv. Okay, as opposed to the negation that we have here, velo yamut. Okay, so here we have a negative result clause, which is positive for him if he doesn't die, but it's grammatically negative. Okay, because it contains the negation of lo. Okay, so we've talked about the imperative, we've talked about the al followed by the jasiv, and we've talked about the lo followed by the yiktol, or the imperfect. And generally speaking, the prohibitive is a negative command, and here the negation of the yiktol is a negative result. Again, negative grammatically, positive contextually. Okay, to prevent his death. Okay, we call it negative, but it's okay. So that's that, and that's the weekly portion of Acharei Mot that deals with the sequence that is practiced when approaching the Lord, when approaching the holiness, which will be a theme that we're gonna cover when dealing with the weekly portion of Kedoshim and the Haftarah. What does it mean to be a kadosh? Ve'al yavo bechol et el hakodesh. What is kadosh? Okay, in the second weekly portion that we have in the reading of this week is the weekly portion of Kedoshim, Acharei Mot and Kedoshim. Acharei Mot is the first of the two. Sometimes people have this kind of an idiom that is based on these weekly portions, and the idiom says Acharei Mot Kedoshim Emor, because the weekly portions of Acharei Mot and Kedoshim are followed next week by the weekly portion of Emor. That creates this kind of a phrase, Acharei Mot Kedoshim Emor, and instead of just mentioning the names of the weekly portion, it means after the death, say they were holy. So if someone passes, you don't have to talk about their shortcomings. Say that they were holy. You know, speak nicely. And obviously, it's just the names of the weekly portions. Acharei Mot, Kedoshim, Emor. But it translates when you say all of these weekly portions, 3 weekly portions together, it means say that, you know, when someone passes, say they were holy.